Good evening. Today we are talking about why Xerxes break is Alec Hardy, but worse. Who are Alec Hardy and Xerxes break? It's quite likely that if you're watching this, you know Pandora Hearts, but not Broadchurch, or Broadchurch, but Pandora Hearts, but I suspect it's more the other way around, or you know neither of them, in which case, what the fuck are you doing here? Alec Hardy is a 40-something-year-old detective from Scotland who's moved to Dorset after a very nasty case where he was living before. And now he's in this completely rural town and has to deal with another big murder. And it's very taxing for him and it's very difficult. And he's very good at his job, but that doesn't mean he's not pathetic. This picture here is not Alec Hardy. This, however, is Alec Hardy. And as you can see, there's a bit of a recurring theme. He's having a breakdown. He does this often. That's fine. If your Alec Hardy is not having a breakdown, that's maybe not Alec Hardy. Okay? Cool. Who is Xerxes break? If you don't know who Xerxes break is, he's a man, maybe? Question mark. He's a very skilled swordsman. He's an age, not really sure how old he is. He was born into a long line of knights, so he's very good at using a sword, you know what I mean, and was protecting a family of nobles who were then killed, and he felt very responsible for this, so he made a contract with a being, let's call him, because I'm not, if you haven't read Pandora Hearts, I'm not going to go into the inner workings of the show just for this. He made a contract with a thing that gave him power, which also resulted in him murdering over 100 people. But it's fine, because then he was thrown into what is called the abyss as his punishment and emerged minus an eye about, I think it was, how long was it later? Was it 30 or 50 years? I feel like it was 30. I do forget though. Anyway, there's a lot more to that to explain. This is Xerxes break. Again, if he's not having a breakdown, well, he probably is Xerxes break. He's not always having a breakdown because unlike Alec Hardy, as we will get to, he masks his breakdowns a lot more in a way. This is a point to be discussed. Why do we care if Alec Hardy and Xerxes break is similar? Oh shit, I didn't need to go to that so quickly. Well, to begin with, it's just interesting. It's just fun. Is there any reason why we shouldn't be collecting characters who are like Xerxes break? I don't think so. They're very fun characters. I think it's also quite interesting that both of them were popular at the same time. Not in the same groups of people, obviously. Generally, the person who reads Pandora Hearts does not also watch Broadchurch. I'm just insane. But it is interesting that the pathetic wet cat character was so popular around, I say around 2012, 2013. Pandora Hearts was popular before that, but I do feel like it really came into a larger popularity around this time. And of course, Broadchurch aired in 2012, I believe. So they were both popular around the same time. And it is interesting to look at sort of why these characters were so popular at the same time. Also, more importantly, as I said before, yeah. So why are they the same? There are 4 main points as to why Xerxes break and Alec Hardy are very similar characters. These are their backstory, the guilt that they carry, the wet cat scale, and their ridiculous names. So let's start with their backstories. I can't remember if I explained already, but Alec Hardy before moving to this rural town in Dorset, dealt with a case in a town called Sandbrook, and this was about two young girls. Is a case about any, you know what I mean. In this case, two young girls were killed, and he initially could not find the murderer, and this weighed on him very heavily. He carried the guilt of these dead children with him. And this, of course, is the same for Xerxes Brake. The family he worked for were killed, including their young daughters, and he carried this guilt with him to the point where he became a mass murderer about it. We can also speak about how they're father figures. With Brake, this is a little less clear-cut, because he's an older brother figure to Sharon Rainsworth, really. But he was also sort of a father figure. It's a very complicated relationship, but in any case, Alec Hardy has a daughter, and he cares so deeply about her, and in a very similar way to how Xerxes Brake cares about Sharon Rainsworth. Escaping their own past, obviously, Xerxes Brake becomes Xerxes Brake, and if you haven't read Pandora Hearts, it's important to mention now, I guess, that Xerxes Brake used to be another person. He used to be Kevin Lenyard, how the fuck you want to pronounce that, and had to leave this identity behind because he was a mass murderer and a criminal. But the point is, he has escaped his own past, and in a very similar way, Alec goes to Broadchurch not to escape his past, because he's bringing it with him, but he does sort of push it down. He does escape his past for the duration of that case, the case in Broadchurch, that is, where, and again, if you haven't watched Broadchurch, I will explain now that when he moved to this rural southern English town, a teenage boy was killed, and he found the murderer who did it, but the whole case was very difficult for him because, of course, it was another murdered child, which is what happened before with his last case that gave him PTSD, and obviously that's very hard for him. So he did leave behind the Alec who couldn't solve the Sandbrook case, and he did solve the Broadchurch case. So there's that. Loss of self, very much so. I mean, Brake had to leave behind the Kevin, who was the skilled swordsman who could protect a family, when he realized, when he didn't protect his family, that he was not able to protect as he was trained to do, as he was meant to do as a knight. He couldn't do that anymore. This maybe is a more contested point in Pandora Hearts, but this is how I feel about him. He had to leave behind the very strong person that he was, and as Oz says, he's weaker than everyone thinks he is, much weaker, even if they perceive him as much stronger than he thinks he is. Anyway, at the end of this first season of Broadchurch, Alec can no longer be a detective for health reasons, and that his entire life revolves around being a detective, so that's very much a great loss of self. And you're probably looking at Hot MILF and wondering what that's about. Well, and I really should have got an image of this, but Alec's ex-wife is hot as fuck. She reminds me that I am very much bisexual, and he's desperate to go, well, not desperate, but he wishes he could go back to her. She cheated on him with another man, and this is in a large part what led to the breakdown of the case back in Sandbrook. She was having an affair. She had important evidence for the case with her in her car. She went to celebrate getting that evidence with the man that she was having an affair with. Her car was broken into, and the whole case was lost. But besides that, Alec just misses her desperately. He misses the family that he had with her. And, okay, this isn't a very clear-cut similarity here, but obviously for Break there was Shelley Rainsworth, who is Sharon's mother, the ex... No, because Cheryl is the matriarch, but Shelley could have been the matriarch of the Rainsworth family. Anyway, Shelley Rainsworth died, and he misses her terribly because they had a very close relationship, and that is another similarity. Next, onto the wet cat scale. They both score very highly on the wet cat scale, as you can see by our wet cat scale visually represented here. They're both right in the highest part of the wet cat scale. Why is this? This is by no means an extensive list, but rather the most, what I would say, the most important examples here. Both of them are simply unable to process affection. There are times throughout Pandora Hearts when, for instance, Gilbert cooks for Break, trying to get him to eat because he looks so unwell, and etc., etc. And Break doesn't even realise that this is an act of affection, and he feels quite embarrassed when he finds out that it is. In a very similar way, Alec cannot... He tries to give affection to Ellie when Ellie being his partner, not romantic partner, but partner as a detective. He tries to comfort her, and she bats him off, and he looks very awkward about this. He just struggles with both giving and receiving affection, and this is something that his ex-wife Tess complains about in one of the short novels that I have read because I am insane. And she says that he just doesn't give affection enough. He gets so caught up in his work that he forgets to be affectionate. He forgets that that's a necessary part of having a relationship, and sort of, well, it's not an important part of being a human being, but to her it is. And he just forgets that. He can't remember that. He can't process that. The next one is that they both will be blown over by a gust of wind. They are both dying, let's face it. Break, spoilers for Pandora Hearts here, Break does. Alec doesn't, but by all means he thinks he's going to. They do not look well. They both are scraggly, washed up, pathetic looking men, and they will be blown over by a gust of wind. They're both hopelessly single. Break... yeah, sorry, but I think Break is the most single character in Pandora Hearts. There are various people you can ship him with, Rain, for example. Will they stay together? No. Alec, in a very similar way, had Tess, obviously. He hits on the owner of the hotel he is staying in, and is rejected because she is afraid that he will collapse on her during sex. And I do believe that this is a very similar case for Break. I think that anyone who gets close to him, he will either reject or they will be afraid of staying with him. And I'm trying to think of examples now of that in the manga, but my brain is drawing a blank, so let's carry on. Yeah, try and find the difference between these images. I can't. You can't. Let's move on. Guilt. Both of them have it. As a father figure, Break feels very guilty that he hasn't even noticed when Sharon became a strong woman, as we see in chapter 49, I believe. But this is more so for Hardy, because Alec, that is, he feels so guilty that he hasn't watched Daisy grow up. He feels he owes a lot to her as a father and has missed most of her upbringing. Over their own failures, that's a big one. Break feels so guilty that he let the Sinclair family died, that he becomes a mass murderer about it, and then takes another contract with another thing, another chain, that will then kill him. Alec obviously carries the guilt about not finding the murderer in the Sandbrook case. He carries that with him to the point where it nearly kills him. They do say that in the show. They say that, and if I haven't made it clear by now, Alec suffers from a heart condition, which they say in the show was greatly worsened by the stress of failing the Sandbrook case. That's and hiding the fact that it was not his mistake that made the case fall through, but rather his wife's mistake. But all in all, he carries this guilt with him so heavily that it literally nearly kills him. And then there's religious guilt. And if you know me and you know Pandora Hearts, you will know that I feel quite strongly, despite not being Catholic myself, that Brake carries an immense amount of Catholic guilt with him. I believe this is also true of Hardy, perhaps not Catholic. I don't really know what the most common form of Christianity up in Scotland is, being neither religious nor Scottish myself. But he is an atheist, but he mentions God at the most crucial moments, just before he's about to arrest the murderer, who is his partner's husband. Just as he's about to arrest the husband of his detective partner for being a child murderer, he tells her that his mother left him with the message, God will put you in the right place at the right time. And I might be misquoting that. But that obviously is weighed quite heavily on him. And he feels that he will be guided somewhere and that he has to live up to that. So, that's the religious guilt part of that. And obviously Xerxes Brake is riddled with Catholic guilt, which, he did kill people, so he should have some guilt, but I think it extends further than that. Let's face it. Have I gone? Yeah, I've done all the others. Ridiculous names. Fucking Xerxes Brake is a stupid name. Why did he get that? Picks up a book, probably saw, I don't know, Cirque du Soleil advertised and went, oh yeah, no, my name is Xerxes Brake. Anyway, Kevin, Rinyard, whatever you want, is also a bloody stupid name. And Alec he says it himself, it's a stupid name. So, they have that in common. I'm wondering about a world in which he's called Kevin Hardy. I don't think it would be better, but it certainly can't be worse. Anyway, that's that. Let's move on. How and why is Xerxes Brake worse than Alec Hardy? Bit of a exposition here. There are some key differences here. Alec puts up a front, but he doesn't put up an exaggerated front. He isn't larger than life. Brake is very much, he puts up this absolutely falsified, boyish, clownish front, which must be exhausting to keep up, when we can see from those moments when he's letting himself be himself that he's not like that at all. And we've seen it from Kevin as well, from who he used to be. He's much more reserved than that. He's much less ready to express his emotions than he'd have anyone believe. Alec doesn't do that. He puts up a much more stoic front, even though very clearly he cares deeply, but he pretends not to. But that's a much less taxing thing to pretend. That's gonna drain him a lot less, I think. Alec also eventually seeks medical help. In the second season, he does eventually allow himself to take a surgery that would supposedly fix him, and it does. Don't think too hard about the medical accuracies of this show. So, that's something that Break does not do. There is the argument there that Pandora Hearts is set questionably in the 19th century, and thus, it's a bit different. But also, Break does absolutely nothing to try and help himself, which Alec also doesn't to begin with, but he does eventually. Alec can sort of work with others, which Break does. Break works alongside others, sort of, but he says himself he isn't cut out for it. Alec hasn't lost all hope, which I think Break has a long time ago. On the other hand, Break is better than Alec in that he's significantly more self-aware. He understands himself, I think, a lot more than Alec does. And this is quite evident when, for instance, in moments like with Sharon, and he sort of realizes that he's not even been present. Well, he's been present, but he hasn't realized how much she's grown up. Alec sort of realizes that about his daughter, but Break makes the effort then to respect her as a full-grown woman, and it's just not something that really Alec has the self-awareness to do. And Break knows that people care for him as well, which Alec doesn't. Alec sincerely believes that if he dies, no one's going to care, even though he has a daughter and an ex-wife and a lot of people who care about him. Break does know that, even if he doesn't necessarily always want to know that, but Alec does not. On a similar note, he's much more honest about himself, about the emotions he's feeling in his past. Alec buries all of that. Whereas Break opens up at not that much prompting and, mild torture from not Isla, you're a fucking bloody Rufus Balmer. Whereas Alec doesn't let it slip even when he's collapsed in front of one of the people in his town, and anyway. Xerxes Break also has the advantage of having red eyes and probably being French, so there's that. On the other hand, there are reasons for why Alec is like this and Break is like this. Yes, Alec puts up a much less taxing front, but he doesn't have such a devastating past self to need to distance himself from. If Break lets on that he is Kevin Lanyard, whatever you want to say, he would be imprisoned, so there's that. Whereas Alec just needs to hide what's going on inside him. He doesn't necessarily need to run from a past in the way that Break does. He seeks medical help because he wouldn't be able to do his job otherwise. He wants to carry on as a detective. He hates the job that he takes on in the meantime when he's been told he can't work anymore because of his physical condition. He hates that job, so then, yes, he takes this surgery that he doesn't want in any way, shape or form because he wants to carry on working. Whereas Break... Pandora really just seemed to let Break carry on fighting despite the fact that he coughs up blood every time he uses his powers. So there's that. Alec has been allowed to work with others without the other being a chain who drove him to mass murder. So again, there's that. And again, he hasn't lost all hope because there is still hope to be had. Break, arguably, that wasn't going to be a good ending for him, so there's that. Again, though, on the other hand, Break is much more self-aware than Alec because he was allowed more time to reflect on himself when he was at his worst, aka after he'd been spat out from the abyss into the Rainsworth mansion. At this point in time in Alec's equivalent timeline, he was struggling with his wife divorcing him. He was struggling with suddenly finding out he had significant health issues. Whereas arguably Brake was just allowed to recover. I mean, we don't know the details of what happened during that period of time, but certainly he probably wasn't as burdened as Alec was at that point. So he is much more self-aware, probably because he's had time to get in touch with himself. And honestly, in my opinion, Brake is very in tune with himself. He doesn't push things down as much as chooses to ignore them, whereas Alec certainly pushes things down. As I say, Brake is surrounded by people who love him, and he is to an extent aware of the fact that they love him. So no wonder he's more honest about himself and his past and everything, because he knows that they love him nonetheless. He knows that, and you can see it in the moment he dies. He knows that he's loved, in my opinion, anyway. He has red eyes because he's a child of ill omen, and he's probably French because he's probably French. So there's that. So there are conclusions. Xerxes Brake and Alec Hardy are two of a kind. Brake is sort of like what could have happened if Alec's situation had been significantly different. If, for instance, Alec had a past to be running from, or if he'd just been allowed to carry on down that self-destructive pathway without someone saying, no, you have to stop this, you have to take care of yourself before you return to work, you have to put yourself and your physical condition first. No one said that to Brake, not really. So he just carried down this path of self-destruction. I mean, was there anything he could have done about his chain killing him? Perhaps not. But I don't think he ever gave it a thought. So, all in all, maybe Brake could have been better if he'd been in a better situation. Maybe Alec could have been worse if he'd been in a worse situation. And these aren't groundbreaking conclusions to come to, but I'm not incredibly sober. So do what you want with this information. Thank you for listening. Contact me if you want. Thank you for this TED Talk, for coming to this TED Talk. Yeah.